Welcome back, everyone, to iNN's Headlines and Beyond. My name is Dr. Daniel Karras, and welcome back to our this is our midweek edition. It's our 8th week of 2015. We missed the weekend edition that just passed due to the fact that, one, we didn't have, there was still a lot of work that had to be done on the script in terms of the information that had to be sort of looked at and reviewed. And the big factor was that there wasn't any internet over the weekend. We lost our internet due to a cable had snapped. So the cable was repaired, but that wasn't done until Tuesday. So there was no weekend edition. So now this is our Wednesday edition, and we're coming to you with a very good show, a very good edition, because we are continuing on our look at the Illuminati. We're looking at decoding the Illuminati and really seeing how this group, these groups, because we're using the Illuminati as an umbrella term for a lot of different secret societies, these so-called clandestine organizations. So it covers a large number of groups. So it's not one entity or a single entity, but a whole variety of entities simply called Illuminati for convenience. So understanding this, we'll look at how the various different factors in world politics today, and we can see that you can actually start decoding things, that there's enough information in the public media, in the public eye, that you can actually start decoding things. You can start seeing where the lies are, where the sort of the mistruths are. But the thing is, you can't use all one type of source. Like, you can't use all sources in the United States. You have to go to sources in Canada, or sources in England, or sources in India. You have to use a variety of sources to really get a better picture of what's going on. In other words, you have to have more than one type of piece of the puzzle in order to understand what's going on and to get a good picture. And that's what we do here, is we pull from a variety of different sources our information. It's reviewed, and then from there, a general script is put together, sort of a note type of script is put together, and we proceed from there. So there isn't a word-for-word transcript here. This is just basically in front of me. There are notes, and as I said before, we are trying to step forward. We're trying to not just simply do journalism to report on things, but actually try to make a difference, to try to change things, to try to improve the way the world works, to improve the human condition in the world. And see, a lot of people talk about humanitarianism in improving the things, but they don't actually do things about it. They don't actually put things forward. And a lot of times, it's their own ideas that they apply to something else. Like, you'll have people like Ben Affleck and a lot of these Hollywood types flying around the world talking about how people shouldn't be having cars and driving to work, that they should be taking public transit. Well, wait a minute here. If you're flying first class, if you have your own private jet, and you're telling somebody else that they shouldn't be driving to work, they should be taking public transit, isn't that slightly hypocritical? But the thing is, no one actually sort of thinks about this. All the stars show up to a Save the World or Green rally. They have an event for Green Day or Earth Day. And all these celebrities show up. Well, how do these celebrities get there? Did they fly in? Did they how did they get there? I mean, and the thing is that no one sort of starts to question and say, wait a minute here. If we're all supposed to be green here, why are you flying in? Again, there's no thought to it. But what it is you have a lot of singing, you have a lot of dancing, you have a lot of showmanship, a lot of entertainment. And the thinking part, the analytical part that's supposed to be there with so-called intellectuals on the left, is completely absent. You're expected to listen and accept what you're being told as gospel truth. In other words, you're looking at a religious festival where you are not supposed to criticize or question the wisdom and authority of the superior religious leaders on the intellectual left. And the thing is, I call them religion because there's no proof on the left side that they are absolute. They are absolutely right. Matter of fact, there's no proof whatsoever. I mean, physics shows that people need to start embracing science. We hope that that the religious right will start embracing science. So wait a minute here. What does science actually say? I'm a physicist. I work on physics every day. That's how I got into all this. I actually got into journalism through cybernetics and psychological observation. This is one of the ways I observe the world. These are part of my research notes on my global observations on how the world, how human beings behave towards one another. This is what journalism is. Journalism is actually a science. It's an observation, a psychological observation of other human beings. That's what journalism is. So it's a science, and my end of it, I come from physics. From physics into quantum mechanics, from quantum mechanics into cybernetics, and from cybernetics to psychology, from psychology into journalism. This is how I arrive here. So it is a science. It is a scientific perspective. And what do I know and understand about the sciences? And about the physics, about my research? Well, that physics is falling apart. That there are a lot of things that are not understood in physics, that theory does not explain. Even when they found the Higgs boson, it didn't solve some problems, but it opened up more questions than it solved. And if you look at the history of the development of quantum mechanics, you'll find the exact same thing. That you go sit down and watch the research colloquium, and all these professors, when they do this research, and the scientists, when they do the research, they go out on these lecture tours to a lot of different universities, and they give lectures to other researchers, to other scientists. And a lot of the stuff is available online on YouTube. But most of the world doesn't see that. They see what's given to the public in standard media reports. They don't see the actual scientific reports. They don't actually see the scientific lectures given by the researchers. They see something designed for the average individual. And what does the average individual see? They see, oh, we found the Higgs boson. What does the researchers see? Not that they found the Higgs boson, but they found a particle that somewhat matches the mathematical formula for the Higgs boson, with some exceptions. They had to adjust the formula. In order to match the Higgs boson. In other words, they adjusted the theory to fit the Higgs boson, the particle that they found. So they could say, hey, we found the Higgs boson. So it's kind of like, if you want to do it this way, throw a dart on the wall and then draw the bullseye around it. That's what's going on in science, particularly in physics. This is not an astounding discovery. You threw the dart ahead of time before you drew the circle. Then afterwards you went around and said, okay, yeah, I hit the target. Well, of course you have more questions than have, because there's a lot of things that you just didn't simply understand. And most physicists understand this. They understand that there is kind of a showmanship there. In order to get their funding, they have to show that they've actually done something, and that they know things, that they have an expertise. But the reality is there is no expertise there. There's no there's no deterministic science in quantum physics anymore. The deterministic science is ancient history in terms of science. It's part of the 1800s. It goes back to the Victorian era if you're talking about deterministic science. Modern science, modern physics is not deterministic, it's probabilistic, which means you cannot prove anything to any degree of absolute certainty. You can only have a degree of understanding, not an absolute understanding itself. And so this is how I approach the news. This is how I approach the observations here. And the thing is, I understand that we're not going to have a full understanding of things, but we're going to have a partial understanding. And as this partial understanding, bit by bit, grows, we'll have a better and better understanding, but we'll not have a full, incomplete, or an absolute understanding of things. And this is why you can look at and sort of say, oh, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on in the Middle East. You look at it and say, wow, this is really confusing. But if you sit down and start pulling the pieces together, instead of doing, taking that spread apart, I understand that now, and this is from an article that I had pulled, and there are a number of articles like this that I pulled from around February 14th, talking about how the United States is in a unique position that we're actually repeating history again. We're back in a situation prior to the Cuban Missile Crisis where there was no security hotline between, there was no the safeguards that they had during the Russian Cold War, the Cold War with the Soviet Union, with the nuclear missiles. There were a lot of safeguards that were developed over a period of time in the Cold War. And this included what's called a red line or a red telephone. It was a direct line between the President of the United States and the President of Russia, the head of Russia. So the two could talk, because these are the two who launched nuclear missiles. It's their authorization that launched nuclear missiles. And the thing is that there is a way to contact each other directly. That's what was happening during the Cold War. That all these so-called these safeguards that were there during the Soviet Cold War are gone. They were dismantled. But the nuclear weapons are still there, and now what's happening is you have the United States with the help of Republican Congress, Adam Kinzinger, and Senator John McCain. You have these people pushing nuclear brinksmanship in Europe. They're trying to cause another war in Europe. And they've already pushed the United States into a Cold War situation. That actually happened over Christmas when Obama signed Adam Kinzinger's Bill H.R. 758 into law. People say, oh, don't worry, he's not going to use it. But they have been using it. But it's just not been publicized. It's not been in the media that Obama and the Republican Congress have been pushing the United States towards war. But here's the thing: Obama could have said no. He could have vetoed it. He said, "Well, remember, Obama's supposed to be anti-war. This is what you hear a lot about out of a lot of the Democrats. Oh, we're against war." But look at some of the stuff that's going on in the world. The so-called regime change. There's no unity. There's no unity on the left on that. Look at the fights between Bill Maher and Ben Affleck over Islamophobia. I mean, I think that the West thinks it's intellectual, that it's superior to everybody else, but it's not. It is so ignorant. And I'm talking ignorant not because they don't know things, because they refuse to. Their assumption of knowledge, the West's assumption of knowledge, is to such a degree that they ignore anything that contradicts what they think is right. This is true on the right, and this is true on the left. It doesn't matter where they sit politically. They are ignorant because they refuse to challenge their own ideas. So they're not independent thinkers. They follow a crowd. They follow their own sense of ego, their own sense of self. And the result is that we're back in the situation where we're at the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is Ukraine has become Obama's Cuban Missile Crisis. And the thing is that there's no safeguards. There's no emergency line between the Kremlin and Washington. There's no line between Putin and Obama. They have to go through intermediaries. And that's a very different situation. And this is so you have articles from a number of different groups talking about how right now we're back in the situation prior to 1995. That's when the safeguards were put in. 1995, the safeguards were put in. And there's no actually the safeguards were put in for a lot longer than. I mean, this is where some of the articles wrong. The safeguards came in actually during the Cuban Missile Crisis. They came in, but the thing is that we're back in the same situation. We're back in the situation here where we could end up with a nuclear war erupting. And the thing is that when we look at the situations going on, we can sort of decode these things and find out that the politicians, well, they're habitual liars. They've been lying to us all along. And the thing is, you can point this out by looking at what they say and a lot of the different research, the articles that come out around it. You can see that they've been lying to us. It's not a mystery that they've been lying. And this is what we're going to do here. We're going to show not only the false flags next, by looking at the different articles that have been around, but we're looking to look and see how the politicians and the mainstream media have been lying to us. Anyways, on the other side, when we come back, we're going to look at the habitual liars in the government.
iNN Uncut. unedited and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're saying, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R184. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN. Provoke, inform and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Welcome back to the other side of the break. We're talking about politicians as habitual liars, but not only do we have politicians, but we have people in the media who are supposedly who call these free media people. There are people like Chris Matthews, like Brian Williams, and so on and so forth, Bill Maher. They have a reputation as celebrity anchors. They all have their positions, they all have their fame, they have their infamy as well, and they all have an image to protect. As we know, if you watch in the news lately, you see the fall from grace from Brian Williams. Brian Williams was the star NBC anchor. What happened to him? Caught lying. Is this unusual for anchors, for news anchors? The answer is no. Most of what you see on TV, most of the media that you see on TV is a lie. There are things that are purposely left out of the shows, out of the news broadcasts, that if you knew it would change your view on what was actually occurring. And they do this to create a narrative, to create an idea, to create a view, a worldview, that there are people out to get us. This is why 9/11, they didn't mention that the hijackers were already on the FBI list, or that the hijackers were being watched up until about a week before the hijacking occurred. And then somebody actually called the FBI agents who were watching, who were trailing, who were surveilling the hijackers. They were called off. That was never reported. That wasn't part of the mainstream thing. But what you did see is you see a huge, dramatic spectacle of the 9/11 towers collapsing. They didn't show they don't show the 800 people a month being killed in Iraq. None of that showing up on the news. They don't show what's been happening in Afghanistan. They don't show how the United States has been in Afghanistan and a lot of other countries working on overthrowing governments since 1970, since 1960. They've been overthrowing governments, the United States. Any government that has not been friendly to the United States or in the U.S. economic interest or U.S. interests, part of their interests, they've been overthrown. As soon as someone says, "Oh, we're not with the United States," or "We're not part of the Western sphere," they're overthrown. Your governments become evil and you need to have a regime change. But no one seems to sort of question that why all the jihadist groups are Sunni, which are funded by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, who are, ironically enough, they get their weapons from the United States and Israel. No one questions that. That's never sort of brought up. I mean, occasionally on the fringe groups you'll see this, on the fringe news broadcast you'll see that, but on the mainstream broadcast you'll never see that. You'll see, anchors huffing and puffing about this and that, and sort of, doing hardball interviews. But the thing is, if you ask yourself, what are they actually saying? And the thing is, they've given you bits and pieces of the picture, but they're not giving you the whole picture here. And I'll give you an example here. You have Chris Matthews on Hardball talking to the State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf. And this is a recent thing. This is February 18th, so it's been all over the news. You can watch this on YouTube. Look it up. And it's this lady from, a nice, cute, blonde girl. Let's use that term there for a bit. Let's cause a bit of current controversy using the term girl instead of woman. Coming out and stating that the way to defeat ISIS is not through weapons and war, but through jobs. That the problem with ISIS is that there's not enough jobs in the Middle East. This is the argument being put forward. Of course, Chris Matthews goes up and all these huffy things, and same thing you have on CNN. And of course, Fox News goes way overboard on the other side, and they're all talking about, Islam and how bad Islam is, and so on and so forth, but they don't give you any particular details about Islam. Then, of course, you always have your Islamic apologists pop up on these different shows who say, "Oh, this is not really Islam. ISIS does not represent Islam." Sit down and do a real study, not from an American or a Western European view of Islam. Go to a jihadist site. Go to the Islamic scholarship sites that are set up around on the internet. And there's a number of them that you can go to. These are not run by Western people. They're run by Arabs. They're run by people from the Middle East who know the Quran, who know the various different books. And we've been talking about this, about the Quran. We're talking about the Hadith. We're talking about the Sunnah. And the different laws, the Sharia law, how the Sharia law actually comes out of the book called the Sunnah. The Sharia law does not come out of the Quran. The Sharia law comes out of the book called the Sunnah. And this is where Sharia law comes from. You'll also find a term in there, if you start studying carefully enough, the term called mutta. And they also have something called the statutes of mutta. When you read through that, you'll find out that this is actually prostitution. And that the term prostitution has been changed, been legally redefined, because like Judaism, Islam is a very judicial, very jurisprudent type of religion. It's based on law, an interpretation of law. And what they've done is they've interpreted the Quran and in the law of the Quran in such a manner that they are allowing something called temporary marriage. They don't call it prostitution, they call it temporary marriage. But you do pay the woman who is part of the temporary marriage and part of the contract, you do pay her due wages. This is what's in the book there. But the thing is, they do view the girl as a slave girl. They don't. She's not on par. This is what's stated in there. She's not on par with a full Arab woman, a full Muslim woman. And of course, non-Muslim women are considered to be significantly lower than the Muslim woman. They aren't. So you can have a slave girl or a non-Muslim girl from Mutta, but you cannot have a proper Islamic girl. So you can't have a Muslim as a girl for Mutta, right? For as a temporary marriage. And so where do they get these temporary girls? Where do they get these non-Muslim girls? Well, you see this. You go on all these sites for girls, and these are women who are being trafficked. Who are they being trafficked for? We see this in India. We see this in Pakistan. We see this in Kosovo. We see this in a lot of areas. We even see this in ISIS now, in Syria, and in Iraq. We see these women being trafficked. For who? For the Islamic men. We say, oh, this is related to simply, oh, this is just ISIS. But look, it's not happening just with ISIS. Go to the Pakistani newspapers. Go to India's newspapers. You'll find this is happening throughout the Islamic world. Go to Thailand. Go read the Thai papers and find out what's happening there. You'll see that the same thing is occurring there with the Sunni groups. And the thing is, so what happens here is you can see that this is not simply an issue of, oh, we need to bomb ISIS out of existence. And it's also not an issue, well, these people need jobs. Both sides here, Chris Matthews and the State Department, are completely wrong about this. And there's a lot of, and if you knew this information, you'd be, hey, wait a minute here, what are you two guys talking about? But what they're doing is they're trying to sort of create a new narrative. that there's a problem in the world, that we have to solve this ISIS problem. Really? Go a little back in history. 2011, you have going to NATO's intervention into Libya, right? The so-called Arab Spring. Find out a little bit later on what happens. Well, apparently they couldn't get back all the weapons that they dumped into Libya, and some of the weapons that went to Libya wound up in Syria with these so-called Syrian opposition to start the Syrian civil war. Of course, you also had Senator John McCain along there with Anderson Cooper on CNN saying how we had to support the opposition groups in Syria to bring about the downfall of Saddam Hussein. They wanted regime change again under Obama. So you had regime change in Libya under Obama. You have regime change again in Ukraine. You had regime change in Ukraine under Obama. Another, in the last 8 years, Obama has been participating in more regime change during his term as president, his 2 terms as president, than any other president in the history of the United States. He's involved in conflict globally. But of course, this is an issue of law, and of course, he's doing everything legally. He creates a legal narrative that this is being done lawfully, that this is not being done with the UN, this is being done in partnership with NATO. It's not the United States acting alone. Right? But at the same time, right, you have this, go continue reading throughout different papers. You have the U.S. will provide, this is February 9th, U.S. will provide its moderate rebel group force on the ground in Syria with armored pickup trucks and communication tools, all to call in airstrikes under a new plan that Washington is pursuing in order to curb the ISIS threat. Right? Right? Moderate fighters are to see Toyota Hilux pickup trucks, not Ford or American trucks, but they're getting Japanese trucks, with machine guns and GPS devices to help U.S.-led bombing missions coordinate strikes against jihadist militants. Right? Go back again a little bit here to January 24th. U.S. troops, mostly special forces from the United States Special Operations Command, SOCOM, will begin arriving in countries outside Syria over the next few days. Right? This is according to Admiral Kirby. Right? Where are they going to land? They're going to land in areas like Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Oh, gee, where do we hear these from? Oh, that was where all the jihadists are coming from. You don't forget, ISIS is Sunni. Sunni is Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Right? This is where the ISIS came from too. This is where they were trained. ISIS trained initially in there, and they came in through Turkey. They came in through Saudi Arabia. They came in through Qatar, and they also came in through Libya. These are the same groups that were armed by NATO in the city in the Libyan operation to overthrow Gaddafi. And all of a sudden, ISIS emerges with the same amount of American weaponry. People say, "Oh, how did ISIS get all that American weaponry?" Well, it was provided to them by the United States because they were, once upon a time, ISIS was a rebel group, an opposition rebel group that the United States was funding with weapons. The United States armed and equipped and trained ISIS. They're doing the same thing again. This is the solution. It failed the first time, so hey, let's try it again. They trained and equipped Saddam Hussein as one of their operatives. They trained and equipped Gaddafi as one of their operatives when they wanted to overthrow that government. They trained and equipped Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein in Afghanistan when they wanted to overthrow that government. So they're saying these things didn't work time and time again, historically. So let's try this again with another group of moderate rebels. What do you think is going to happen in the next year with this moderate group that they're funding? And they have a little aside here. However, given the coalitions, given that the coalition governments all have proven their commitment to removing Syrian President Bashir Assad from power, some observers expect that the ulterior motive in the U.S. plan. In other words, they're planning to remove Assad as well. They're going to destabilize Syria, use the destabilization of Syria as an excuse to go in and create war in there, and eventually overthrow Assad. But it doesn't end there, because one group does it, and why isn't it good for other groups? So you have from Britain, a former head of British intelligence, saying, "Hey, we should renew engagement in Libya now." So not only are they going into Iraq now, back into Iraq again, they're going into Syria, and now they're also planning to go into Libya. This is all at the same time while they're still operating and working on Ukraine. But if you think Ukraine is the only thing that's going on, think again. Because the United States and the EU and NATO are still involved in Kosovo. Right? The breakup of Yugoslavia. That was under Bill Clinton. So what happens is you have the United States, NATO, and its allies involved in all of these overthrows, all of these all of these wars, to create an environment that is American or Western leaning, that's favored towards the United States. And there are people who are standing up and starting to recognize, hey, this is wrong. Oliver Stone is one of the directors, Hollywood directors, is saying, hey, something smells here. What's his name? Paul Ryan. Not Paul Ryan. Ron Paul. He was once running for president. He was a Republican senator. He comes out. He's very open and saying, "Hey, the United States is starting to create a war. They're trying to do war." And this is Obama doing this. This is not simply a Republican-led crazy Congress. This has been going on way before Republicans took over. They had retaken Congress again. So this is both Democrat and Republicans together creating this chaos here. And of course, the leader of France's right-wing party, that she just won a couple seats. They say, that Brussels is falling in line with the United States is trying to create a war in Europe. They're trying to start another war. Of course, the hidden in the back pages again, what do you find? Ukraine has agreed to increase the cost of gas to the consumer by 280% and 66% for heating, as part of IMF terms for getting extra financial aid. Yeah, we begin to see here how politicians are habitual liars, that they never seem to be able to tell the truth. And we'll see how this plays into the Illuminati hand when we come back.
iNN, uncut, unedited, and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're seeing, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for, $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R184. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN, provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
In order to understand the Illuminati and how it attaches itself to the psychology of evil, we need to understand the Illuminati, when they went into the East during the Crusades, picked up a lot of texts that were very much pagan-oriented. They didn't really understand... Well, I'm not going to say they didn't understand what was going on in the East. They did have an understanding of what was going on in the East. What was going on in the East was that paganism offers a lot of power. Christianity, you really can't go into a place with armies and do the standard conquest, because Christ said we are immortal as Christians, we don't fear death, and so that if someone comes at you and attacks you as a Christian, let them kill you, because you'll go to heaven as a martyr. You're guaranteed as a martyr, as a Christian martyr, if you don't fight back, you accept your death as a Christian, that you're guaranteed to go to heaven. And you'll be part of the family of Christ, part of the family of God. So there was no need to fight back. There was no need to be angry or to be incensed or to seek revenge or justice, or call revenge justice itself. These were a later interpretation by a group of Germans, the Franco-Flemish alliance, that needed to build an empire, and they could only do it through conquest. So what did they do? 1000 AD, they changed Christian theology. It went from being a peaceful, spiritual, Eastern understanding of God to a war, pagan type of God, where God was angry and then demanded justice. And so, therefore, the papacy, the Pope, had to put together an army and take back the lands in the East from the evil Arabs, the Islamists. Of course, this was a lie. Anyone who knows history, the ancient history, the full ancient history, has read the Greek text, knows that this is a lie. That this was a creation, this myth of saving the Christian world of the Middle East from the Arabs was a lie. That this was not the purpose of the Crusades. The purpose of the Crusades was to create an army to unite Europe under the papacy, to create a European papal empire. It was empire building that created the Crusades, not religious, not Christianity. And unfortunately, a lot of the apologists, who and particularly the Islamic apologists, refer to Christianity as the European Christianity, but they're missing 1,000 years worth of history. European Christianity emerged 1000 AD. Christianity did not come from Europe. Christ was not European. He was Middle Eastern. He was Jewish. He was a Hebrew, not a European Hebrew. He was a Hebrew from Israel, from Palestine. He was not white. He was like all the Middle Easterns, the people who were from Israel, from Syria, from Greece. He was Asian. He had dark skin. He was not white. But the Arab apologists, the Islamist apologists, ignore this. When you hear them talking, oh, the Westerners don't understand the East. They don't understand Islam. But Islam is not the East. Islam emerged at the same time that the Western Christianity did. They emerged around 600-700 AD. This is when Islam emerged. That means there was 700 years of Christianity in the Middle East prior to Islam. The science that was accredited to Islam was not Islamic. It was pre-Islamic. But again, this is missed out. We look into Islam. This is what we did before. We looked into Judaism. We looked at the Talmud. We saw the terms in the Talmud that allow and excuse sexual abuse. We also saw within the Islamic text, both the Quran and the Sunnah, the terms, particularly the statutes of mutta, the statutes of temporary marriage that allow for the same type of sexual abuse to occur to non-Muslim women. We see this. And we understand that a lot of this stuff comes out of paganism. And if you go into paganism, the best place to go in to look at paganism, the history of paganism, is to go to India. India is a pluralistic society that has tolerated a lot of different religions in there because they have a polytheistic society. They believe in multiple gods. So they don't have a problem with Christ or God because there's simply one other God. And they allow all religions, they have all truths to coexist. So you can have the truths of a feminist saying women have the right not to be objectified, they can be equal to men, and we need to go after these rapists. And that's the truth. And then the Indians accept this. But you also have the truth of the Devadasi. These are the temple prostitutes, and India's cults that have a lot of prostitutions in it. Part of their religious rites, prostitution and sexuality is part of the religious rites, including tantric Buddhism, and there's also a form of tantric Hinduism as well, because tantric Buddhism comes from Hinduism. It's a Hindu practice, a human sexual practice that teaches spirituality through sexuality. You use sexuality to achieve a higher spiritual state. And this is well known within pagan societies, within pagan cults. This is not isolated to India, but all pagan cults prior to Christianity. This was seen actually in, if you go into the Greek cults, the so-called Greek mythology cults, everyone talks about, Hercules and so on and so forth, and they have this sort of whitewashed view, historical view of ancient history of what Hercules was like. Well, understand that the girls who were prostitutes between the ages of 8 and 13 years old. Understand this, and the history doesn't become so nice. But of course, this is sort of left out. Same thing with the whole thing now. They're bringing up the crystal skulls, the sugar skulls from the Day of the Dead, the Mexican, that's the South American festival of the Day of the Dead. What they're leaving out is that part of the old ancient ritual in satisfying the god of the underworld, Shiboba, is the rape of a 13-year-old virgin girl. The death and dying screams of this girl are music to the ears of Shiboba. This same understanding is true for the Vikings. The Viking funeral, the Viking funeral that sends the Viking into Valhalla. The gates of Valhalla are opened by the gang rape of a slave girl, the favorite slave girl. As she's gang raped and dying, the screams open the doors to Valhalla. This is their heaven. This is paganism. And when the Crusaders went into the East and brought back these texts, these were the secret texts that went into the secret societies. And they began practicing a lot of these pagan things. Why? Because this is how you did conquest. This is how you learned how to get control. Because you got powers from hidden forces, from these hidden angels, from these dark angels. They were given powers. Or at least they believed they were given powers. But look at history, right? Hitler believed he was creating a new world order, right? The NWO, right? The New World Order! They're going to create the New World Order! Well, Hitler believed that. What ended up happening to Hitler? What happened to that New World Order plan? And the thing is that you can see the evil of paganism, which is equal in the Indian eye. So the person rapes a girl, the feminists get all upset and have the guy arrested. Oh, how horrible. The guy says, this is part of my religion. This is my truth. And the courts say, okay. And they wait a few months and a few years. They drag the case out. And the guy is eventually let go and nothing ever happens. This is an article from an Indian Times about a girl describing her rape trial, in which one by one, more or less, everybody got off. Particularly the wealthy and the political people who were involved in her rape. And this is typically the case. This is what we saw with Dominique Strauss-Kahn in the rape, the hotel rape in New York City. He was recently busted on a being involved in a sex ring in France. He's the former head of the IMF, right? He's involved in he's part of the Illuminati. Of course, here's the Illuminati throwing one of their own as a sacrificial lamb, throwing one of their own under the bus. They need to have some bodies out there show that they're not all together. That it's sort of that it's every man for themselves. That's what they're doing, because that's what it is about. It's the ultimate rule in the Illuminati society is every man for. It's basically about power and control. And if somebody messes up and you want to get them out because they wanted another person for the IMF chief, the way to get this out, this whole issue that appeared in the media about Dominic Strauss-Kahn and his sexual assault, they knew what was going on. Everybody knew what was happening. That there were these sexual parties going, that girls were being given as parties. Look at Berlusconi. Everyone knew that Berlusconi was involved in these parties. Nothing ever happened to him. They just wanted to get him out of the way politically. So they brought it up in the news, and there is your political assassination. And they got the person out of the way, and then the person they wanted to have in position and power got their position in power. This is the same thing with with politics in the United States, with the whole thing about feminism, right? Talk about feminism, right? Right? Feminism. Oh, sexual harassment. When you talk about Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, 1991, right? George Bush, the first George Bush, nominated Clarence Thomas, a Republican, for the Supreme Court of the United States. A woman pops up and says, Anita Hill pops up and says, I was sexually harassed by so and so. Here's my proof. And there really wasn't much of any proof. They were talking about that there was a pubic hair on the can of Coke somehow. At least something looked like pubic hair, right? Then you have now also here Miley Cyrus walking around naked, and a whole bunch of other young neo-feminists talking about sexual empowerment, free the nipple, right? Women should be empowered through their sexuality. So what happens when Bill Clinton comes up and sexually abuses Monica Lewinsky? Nothing. The feminists say nothing. This is the reality of our world today. There isn't much that you can actually find that is true. And I'm not actually asking you to believe me. One of the reasons why I'm telling you to go do the research is I want you to understand that you do have to do research for yourself, because you shouldn't believe everything that you're hearing or that you're being told. You need to question things. But the only way you can question things is if you read and study. If you don't read and study, there's no way you can question, because you're not going to get the answers. And reading and studying do not have to be all day long. You start off slowly. You start off bit by bit. And slowly you work your way into a better understanding of things. This is the same thing here. And you'll see this here. This is why this is part of our news broadcast, is part of an education program that's available to everyone. That's free and open. That I'm going to be offering to sex workers of Canada, through the sex professionals of Canada. This is my offer to them. Have people start watching this. The more you sit down, the more you watch, the more you're going to learn. You don't have to take notes if you don't want to, because the more you understand this, the more we look around at things and look at other different programs out there, look at other news broadcasts to see what's being said around the world, you begin to understand, hey, what we're being told is not necessarily the entire truth. That there's more there than we're being told. And this is when you start putting together these stories, you begin to understand how the Illuminati are not a monolithic thing. That the New World Order is not a new thing, that they've had ideas for New World Order multiple times, but they've never succeeded. And we see that the root of all this is evil. That there's a lot of evil in the world, a lot of evil in society, that they're trying to destroy innocence, that the target is innocence. And when we come back on the other side, we're talking about what the targets are. The targets of innocence. We know what the targets of innocence are. They're your children. The goal is to make ugly, horrible, disgusting. Horrors, normal. When we come back.
iNN, uncut, unedited, and real. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Hi, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I'm your host for Headlines and Beyond on iNN. If you like the show we're saying, I do not monetize my channel because there's a lot of copyright issues with this. It creates a lot of problems. So how do I make my money? Well, if you like this show, it's very simple. We do it the PBS format. I ask you for a donation, but I'm not going to ask you for a lot. Or, well, all you have to do is, if you have $1 or $2 in your pocket, take it out, put it in an envelope. I'll give you the address. It will be in the description of my channel. Go to the channel description, go to About, and you'll see the address to send the $1 or $2 that you send. All I'm asking for $1 or $2. If you got $1 or $2 in your pocket, stick it in an envelope. Send it to iNN. That's iNN. The address is 87 Telson Road. It's 87 Telson, Telson Road. That's in Markham, Ontario. Postal code is L3R184. And I thank you for your support. Alrighty.
iNN, provoke, inform, and change. We deal with issues that other networks won't.
Welcome back to our fourth and final segment. Getting to our talk about the evils of the psychology of evil. Now our politicians are knee deep in it. They're actually participants, willing participants in the psychology of evil. We see how people at the top of the IMF are involved in the sex trafficking of women. How people on the left and the governments, even if they claim the left has say, hey, there's no soul, there's no morality, we can do whatever we want. We see this with Playboy, we see this with Hustler, we see this with Bill Maher. It doesn't matter what you do. You know, there's no soul, there's no morality. Do what you feel. As long as you feel that it's right, it's okay to do. Of course, if you sort of cross Bill Maher's thinking, his intellect, and dare to challenge him, he gets all upset about it. Same thing with Ben Affleck, who's also on the left, who believes he's an intellectual. So you have all these intellectuals up there sparring with each other, saying, "I'm more intellectual than you are." "Oh no, you're not." And of course, when they really get upset, they flash the finger, and there goes the argument. They go into sign language after that. That both sides, left and right, moral and amoral, participate in the pagan understanding that people are not human beings and that they can go in to a low-class society, to people who are poor and impoverished, and use them for whatever they feel they want to, for their own pleasure. They seek pleasure at other people's pain. They seek pleasure at other people's misfortune, and believe that their fortunes are guaranteed and smiled upon by the gods because the people who are unfortunate do not have what you have. In other words, Miley Cyrus is not a slut. Miley Cyrus is not a whore. She is not a prostitute. Why? Because she's rich. The person who is on the street, who becomes a prostitute because she needs something to eat, that's a dirty prostitute. That's a dirty whore. That's a dirty slut. The prostitute who is given a choice, who has a mansion, who has money, who has fame like Miley Cyrus, is not a prostitute because she has fame, she has money, she has fortune. That is the definition of Hollywood, the alternative morality. And it's pervasive. It's now being taught and understood by our young people in society. And they don't understand why things are wrong. And I explain to people, hey, look, what's being created. Why, they see some of these horrible things that are going on. They say, well, how can this happen? Simple. How can these things go on that are horrible in society? Because society is now a psychopath. We've created a psychopathic society that believes nothing is wrong, or that the only things that are wrong are things that don't bother me, or make me uncomfortable. If things bother me or they interrupt my sense of lifestyle, then they're wrong. That's the morality. But as long as I enjoy them, I find them pleasurable, then hey, it doesn't matter who gets hurt, as long as it's not me. And we see this in Stanford University, the Dr. Philip Zimbardo's Stanford University experiment. We see this in the Stanley Milgram experiment. All these experiments looked at how Nazis and the Nazi society could do this. How do people, the government agencies who carried out the orders of Hitler, how are they able to do all this? Well, we see how they're able to do all this. And we see this in the TSA, we see this in the border guards, we see this in the police. That the government say, do this evil thing, police person, do this evil thing, border guard, do this evil thing, soldier. And the soldier says, well, I'm just doing my duty. I'm doing what I'm told. It doesn't matter what the conscience is, what the conscience. It doesn't matter how Christian the soldier is. A lot of soldiers are from the Christian right. It doesn't matter how Christian right they are. They will commit evil if they're told to. And they'll simply say, I'm simply following orders. This is the police. This is the government workers. These are the judges. This is military. Simply following orders to do evil, even though they don't believe it. They call themselves moral. They call themselves Christians. They call themselves people on the right. They call themselves religious. And yet they will do evil if they are ordered to. And of course, they'll then at the same time, when they get drunk, they'll do evil. When they're part of the Illuminati, these secret societies, like the different sororities and more particularly the frats, they'll do evil. Oh, I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. This is a rite of passage for the youth. I'm sowing my wild oats. And they come up with a number of excuses of it. Islam does the exact same thing. The statutes of Mutta, there's no, a temporary marriage that you rent a person for. Rent a woman, rent a girl, statutes of Mutta. That's not prostitution. That's Mutta. That's temporary marriage. Who are you kidding? We see this with young girls. We see the young girls being trafficked. You see this in a lot of these sort of Islamic sites that have girls models available that you can rent for a little while. Of course, now they're called models. They're not called prostitutes. They're called models. So we see this on the right. We see a moral person like this. We see this in the Talmud. That goes on. We see this in Orthodox Jewry, how they're able to abuse children simply by saying, "Well, we interpret it as not being." Not as lying with a man or a woman. We interpret this as being something separate. And as I gave you the information on that, you can go back and sort of check that out. And we see this in the Hindu caste system. We see this with the Hindu system, the pagan system, that the people on the lower end of society, the elites, the untouchables, classes that are low enough that they are believed to be cursed. This includes ideas that have crept into Calvinism. This is the Protestant view of Calvinism, that people who are well off, people who are rich, are smiled on by God, and therefore they are saved, they're guaranteed their salvation, and they can do anything they want to people who are lower. People who are lower, people who are poor, they are poor because they've been cursed by God. This is predestination. The Hindu has the same thing. The Quran has the same thing. They don't believe in free will. They believe in predestination, and that people are cursed or saved, not in anything in between. And so the saved, who are primarily rich and wealthy, can do anything they want to the poor, who are destined to be poor, who are created by God to be poor. And this is what we see happening here. This, in the sense that the Hindus do the same thing. We see the Catholics creating the Christian war god. We see the Protestants taking the Christian war god and creating and adjusting it for their own particular needs. And you see the same thing in the evangelicals and every other Christian group that pops out of this. They excuse their sins. They excuse the misbehavior. They excuse the immorality. And so the immoral becomes moral because they have an excuse for it. Only when you go back to the true Christian fundamental, the proper Christian fundamental, who understands, and because he's been told by Christ, whatever you do to the least, you do to me. In other words, this is Christ's own word. Whatever you do to the least, you do to me. In other words, whatever you do to the woman, when you rape a woman, when you're renting a woman, a slave girl, you bring that slave girl in. You train that slave girl to be, by the pimp, to be a proper slave girl, to be nice to the customer. You're doing that to Christ. This is the Christian understanding, the proper fundamental Christian understanding. When they talk about throwing stones at an adulterer, the Bible has horrible things in it. They talk about stoning people to death. Did they mention that Christ said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone"? No. That's completely glossed over. And of course, these people were all scholars. They have gotten books written. They're on their second or third book, and they've got papers and degrees, and they're scholars. They know what they're talking about. But yet they've completely forgotten that when they talk about stoning women to death in the Bible, in the Gospel, that it was Christ who said, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." In other words, he stopped it. He spoke out against it. This is not mentioned. It's forgotten. And of course we see here, as liberalism pops up and says, they're looking at the religious right and saying, "Hey, you guys are immoral. You just call yourselves immoral, but you really are immoral. So let's just throw out the entire morality thing and let's have open sexuality." That's what they had in Europe. What happens with open sexuality in Europe? And they talk about consent. Well, we are consenting adults. Well, now you actually have consenting children as well, because they, in Sweden, and a lot of throughout Europe, began teaching sex education to children as young as 6 years old on how to consent. But what do we see in the results of that? We see record high levels of human trafficking, record high levels of pedophilia, record high levels of rape. Why? Because you cannot bring rape into court where you believe that open sexuality exists. In other words, if open sexuality is your standard, that consent is standard, then there is no rape, there is no non-consent. People are saying, "Oh, well, it's just sex, get over it." And this was Hollywood's view when about Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski raped a girl when she was 13 years old, ended up in Europe, being a hero in Europe. Hollywood's reaction to it, "Well, it's just sex, get over it." She got over it, there's nothing wrong with her. She got over the being raped. It was just sex. And this is what they're now trying to teach throughout the United States and in Canada from the government. The government is trying to come in and say, "Well, we need to teach our children about sex. We need to teach them about consent, because we're all animals. We're human beings. There's no soul exists." But then again, they turn around and say, "Well, if you're transgendered, then gender is a concept. It doesn't really matter what you believe about gender, because it's only a concept. Really, what about biology? I thought we were animals. I thought we were supposed to look at reality." And when you see that, you start beginning to see the double standards of the left, of the so-called feminists, of the so-called intellectual groups. If you're an animal and there's no soul, how are you an intellectual? None of this is ever questioned. None of this is ever asked. No questions like this are ever asked of the left. The left doesn't ask themselves this question. And I think so what happens, you have on both the left and the right, you have people who, in order to support their positions, in order to support their esteem, their stature in society, will sit there and tell you absolute crap and hope you believe it. Because they know most people are not going to go and check up on it. So you'll have the people on the left believing the people on the left. The people on the right will believe the people on the right. And they'll argue back and forth even though both sides have no idea what they're talking about. And when you sit down and start putting everything together as an independent, not looking at whether one side, looking at whether one side is right and one side is wrong, put everything together. What does it say? Does it say one side is right and the other side is wrong? Or does it say both sides are right? or both sides are wrong. And in most cases, when you start putting the stuff together, you see both sides are wrong. The left and the right is wrong. And we see that, Islam is a horrible religion. But then so was Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholic and the creation of the Christian war god and the Protestants who emerged out of it, they are no better than the Islamic right, than the Islamic jihadists. How do you understand this? How do you say, oh, that's not really true? Really? Look at Ireland. Look at the dead on the Irish Catholic and the Irish Protestant. Look at the number of dead on both sides of this case here, on both sides of the of a religious spectrum between Protestants and Catholics. Look at how long that war lasted. There's no Islam there. It's Irish against Irish. They have to be Catholic against Protestant, but Irish against Irish. And you see this all over the world. You go into history, look at these Protestant and Catholic so-called seminaries, these schools where they bring in orphans. Look at the abuse. Look at the torture that comes out of these so-called residential schools that were so-called religious schools. Look at the abuse that was going on in there. Look at the sexual abuse that came out of the Vatican. The Vatican knew what was going on. There's no way the Vatican didn't know what was going on. The Pope is a vicar of Christ. He's got the power of Christ in him. He's omnipotent. He's all-knowing. The papacy didn't know what was going on. Anyways, I encourage you to take a look at these different things that are going on, to really look at how our world works, to start asking questions. And to do this, I set up every so often challenges, and I give you different resources to go out and take a look at and say, okay, this is what's going on here. And I gave you at the beginning a base reading to read George Orwell's 1984, that was published in 1949, and to look at Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince, which was published in the late 1600s. I then recommended a study that you'd go and look at all of George Orwell's work, because here's the next study that you need to do, or should be doing, and it's the study of Fyodor Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky is important for a lot of different reasons in Europe, in the understanding of the European mind, but he's also important for what's going on in Ukraine, to understand the Ukrainian situation better. If you do not look at Dostoevsky, you are missing a key element to the Ukrainian crisis. He's important. Go look him up. Do research on it. I'll put stuff in the notes. Look at the notes that are passing around that from my different when I put the announcement out that the video is up. And in the description itself, look for Fyodor Dostoevsky. If you can't remember the name, look for the name in there. Copy it, paste it into a Google search, and start doing your Google search research on there. I like that. Start off with your research. Google's good for starting your research. Build it from there. Start simple. Anyways, my name is Dr. Daniel Karras. I thank you for joining us for our midweek edition of iNN's Headline and Beyond for the 8th week of 2015. All right. See you on the weekend. All right. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the library, and I am the librarian.
I am the professor. And professor of what? Professor of physics.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
Free speech rules here at Democratic Earth.